Well, that didn't go as planned. The Kansas State Wildcats fall to the Baylor Bears 70-56 in the Big 12 tournament.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. We are talking college basketball, and it might be the last one for a little while because Kansas State falls to Baylor in the Big 12 tournament in the second round, and unfortunately, their season will be coming to an end. Don't know if they're going to be some postseason as well, but there is no chance for them to go dancing. We'll get more into that in just a minute. Before we do, this episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Well, head on over to turbotax.com and get matched with your expert today. It was not a great way to go out on the season, but to be completely honest, kind of quite fitting after having a decently good game yesterday. Well, peaks and valleys returns for the Kansas State Wildcats, and they fall 70-56 in a game that after the first 80 seconds of gameplay didn't really have a chance, didn't really have the feeling of even wanting to be there. It was a really tough game for Kansas State, and I know they were trying really hard, don't get me wrong, and you could tell in the post-game interviews and how everybody was feeling that there was a lot of tension, a lot of people upset that their season was over, but Baylor outplayed them. And I mean, there's a reason why Baylor had the bye and Kansas State didn't. This team is better. Baylor was playing for, really, now that they have this one win in the tournament, they're pretty safely secured in a spot for March Madness to go dancing. Kansas State had to win the whole dang thing. If Baylor loses on Thursday to Texas Tech, they're still going to be in the tournament. So they just needed this one. And quite frankly, it felt like Baylor just wanted it more. David Gasson played absolutely electric. That's what we expected from him after only playing 17 minutes on Tuesday night against Arizona State. He played 38 minutes, was only out for just a few, and finished 8 from 9 for the field, had 20 points and 10 rebounds. A double-double that will most likely end his Kansas State Wildcats career. That is probably the most sad thing I have said since I have started this podcast just a few months ago, is that right there. David Gasson, we will probably see that as his final game. He came out with a double-double, though. That's pretty cool. 8 for 9 from the field. The only thing that I wish he would have did more is shot more, is had more opportunities, because he was really their bread and butter, their heart and soul, as Doug McDaniel said in the presser the other night. He is the guy, and he was proving it in this one. They had a really tough time from everywhere else, especially shooting from the three-point line. After starting 5 for 5 from the three-point line in the Arizona State game, they were 0 for 5 in this one, and they finished 3 for 25 overall from the three-point line in this game, 12% from beyond the arc. I mean, you just can't win basketball games like that. It is absolutely impossible, especially when the other team is making 33%. I mean, more than double, almost, triple. We're talking triple the amount of three-pointers, and also shooting better overall from the field. Kansas State shot 36% from the field, and Baylor, a better team, shot 46% from the field. They were out-rebounded 37-32, and that, quite frankly, felt like a lot more. It felt like Baylor was all over the boards in this one. I'm surprised it was only a 5 differential when it was all said and done. Doug McDaniel finishes with 14 points, 6 for 17 from the field, did have 7 rebounds as well. I mean, for the majority of the first half, it felt like the best rebounder out there for Kansas State was Doug McDaniel. And that's not a knock on Doug McDaniel. He was playing lights out defensively. You could tell he was putting his heart and soul into this one, but he shouldn't be your leading rebounder. He should not be. He's your point guard. And that's just the way this one went. The biggest downside, the biggest disappointment in this one has to be Coleman Hawkins. Coleman Hawkins went 2 from 9 for the field, only had 5 points, and he just struggled. Had 7 rebounds. He had 4 fouls in this one. Overall, just struggled. And that comes off a season high best of 26 points the night before against Arizona State. Thought we were on cloud 9. Thought we were getting a new kind of tournament Coleman Hawkins after what he did against the Sun Devils on Tuesday. And that just didn't show up in this one. Was it the fact that the season was on the line and he had this sense of pressure on him? I think more than anyone else on this team, he probably has the most pressure and had the most pressure on him all season long. When things weren't going right, the first thing that people would point at, with the exception of Coach Tang, because that seems like to be the one that social media likes to point fingers at all the time as well. But the next one, especially if it comes to any player, has been Coleman Hawkins. And the criticism is valid in some shapes and forms because he is getting paid a pretty high amount to come play 1 year at Manhattan. And the results weren't what were expected. We have to remember this is a college athlete, and this is a young player that is still dealing with pressures of just being a college athlete. Now, I know, and you can go ahead and make this rebuttal, that the college athlete asked for this, and they wanted this type of NIL to be paid, and they need to be treated like that case. If they're going to be paid, they need to be paid to win. Okay, fine. Have that conversation. But we have to not forget about the human element of it all. We have to remember it, because that is exactly what we just found out this season. There were ups and downs. There was issues that were dealing with social media and pressures from this team and trying to figure out how to navigate through this new NIL world that Kansas State is still trying to navigate. This is really their first full season. They went all in on bringing players into the portal. And I don't think that's changing, for the record. I think they got a lot of lessons learned. I think the PowerPoint is stacked when they go and have that conversation, when they sit down and go through all the things that happened this season. But I think you have to remember the human element in this one. And unfortunately, I think we're learning that one a little too late. All the buy-ins that we're starting to see, unfortunately, those happened in March. But I feel really good about the future of this basketball team. And I think you should too. I really think you should too. Although it's the second season in a row that this team will not be going to the NCAA tournament. Although that Jerome Tang started off with an Elite Eight run in his first year, I think he's building something that is going to be really special. I think he's got the idea, and I think if we give him a chance to run with it, we can be in really good shape for years to come, not just a one-time deal like in his first year. If you think about this, this was a really tough scenario for Kansas State to be in. I think we blindly looked past it because of all the money flowing in and all the national media that was saying that this portal class is one of the best portal classes in the entire nation as we began the season. But now, in retrospect, that's a really tough task to do. Bringing in guys from all different areas, from different coaching styles, from different conferences, putting them all together without any experience, basically letting anyone else walk in the portal, not having any type of returning production for the most part, if any, with the exception of Gassan, and then expect them to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament just because money talks? I don't think that's how this works. And I think we just found that out. I don't think you go away from it. I don't think you stray away from it, because the adapt or die scenario is absolutely real in college athletics. But I think there's a big learning lesson here. We'll find out if they can continue to keep this core, this new core that they brought in this season, and start building what Coach Tang wants to do with this Houston model. We'll talk about that later on in the show. But when we get on the other side of the break, I stopped in with Locked On Big 12's host, Drake Toll, to talk about this loss and talk about the future of Jerome Tang and the rest of this roster. So we'll get that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So if you stop managing your money and start building wealth. The surprising insights when I started using Monarch was I just realized how much I was spending on food delivery and takeout and eating out. It was terrible. Now I budget smarter and save more thanks to Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your entire first year. That's right, monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. This episode is also sponsored by Factor. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Well, Factor makes eating easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat in just under 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences, every week you can customize your meals and fit your lifestyle, whether it's calorie smart, protein plus, or keto. Plus, Factor even makes wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. Just last time I checked out the Protein Plus meals, they were packed with flavor, kept me full throughout the day, and with a little one running around, having the speed of being able to not worrying about meal prepping is my absolute favorite. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. So eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off and use code LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off your first box. Factormeals.com to get free shipping and 50% off your first box.
Christian Rao of Locked On Kansas State. There is no better expert to talk about this one. Jerome Tang, I know there have been murmurs in season, even last offseason, about him returning to Baylor, going to the quiet life, fading away. There was controversy last season. There's more controversy again as he'll miss back-to-back NCAA tournaments, will not make a postseason whatsoever. This one, at least if they're invited, I know that you mentioned off air that they will likely decline that. I know it's year 3. But to regress the way that Kansas State has, right? Had Jerome Tang not gone to that Elite 8 in year 1, maybe things are a bit different, but the fan base just seems unhappy.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like it's a social media problem. I don't know if it's a full Kansas State problem. I think it's just a small group of
Twitter
upset people. Yeah, really, Twitter.
Yeah,
I think
Twitter.
It is the case. But when you get an idea of the actual whole Kansas State fanhood, I don't know if it's the same feeling about Jerome Tang. Now, to continue on that part, well, obviously they fall to Baylor, and Baylor's a great team, and there's a lot of relationships between Jerome Tang and Baylor, and we all know those. Everybody on the broadcast will let you know a million times about him as well. But he did say that they're also not going to most likely participate in any type of postseason tournament. He said that he thinks that the crown like Las Vegas is a bad timing for Kansas State, and he thinks seniors like Coleman, Hawkins, and David Gasson won't want to play in it. So he said, quote, "I don't see that happening." So nothing confirmed, but again, I think the season for Kansas State is over. I don't think he's on the verge of losing his job. Now, one, the buyout's absolutely insane. It's close to $18 million, Drake. I don't think that's going to happen. Now, if he decides to leave, that number's a lot lower that they have to pay him. But if Kansas State decides to remove or void his contract, it's about $18 million, or at least somewhere around that area, to buy him out. So I don't think that's happening because you already had this type of NIL feeling. You had some kind of NIL traffic coming in this season. It didn't work out. Now, according to some media outlets, it was the number 2 transfer portal class in the entire country, and you're not even going to make the dance. So it obviously didn't work out. I can see that being a concern moving forward. We saw what just happened with Utah. The reason for why Utah's coach is no longer going to be there because donors were no longer willing to give NIL. Could that be a concern in the future for Kansas State? I think we would be ignorant not to think that could be a concern in the future. But right now, I think he's pretty safe, and it's unfortunate that they couldn't make a long dance into Kansas City because I think that just would have been really fun. A Colorado Kansas State final, like, wouldn't that have been fun?
That would have been pretty neat, and sadly, we will not see that in this year's Big 12 tournament. interesting this season. You lose 9 out of 10 when you're Kansas State, including losses to Wichita State, to Drake, Oklahoma State. Then you rattle off 6 in a row, including that win at number 3 Iowa State by 19 points, only to follow up that win streak by losing 4 in a row. Does it feel like the angst, that's the word I'm going to use, the angst from Kansas State fans comes from a place of just confusion? I mean, had it been more of a, 2 wins, a loss, 3 losses, 2 wins kind of season, maybe there's a little less pent-up frustration, but just the ebb and flow of hope and despair has got to be demoralizing.
They love to say in college basketball that it's a game of runs, and I think they took that too seriously this year with their winning streaks and losing streaks. And the fact that they started off just dreadful in non-conference, and after getting the Big 12 opener, that was great against Cincinnati, you falling 6 straight in the Big 12, it just left a really sour taste. It was a nice feeling having that 6-game winning streak against multiple ranked teams in the middle of the season, in the middle of the Big 12 conference. It gave us hope, right? There was a fact we were back on the bubble at one point as an at-large team, but it just wasn't meant to be. And I think that's probably where the angst is coming from. Obviously you can talk about any kind of burner sitting behind a Twitter and talk about who they want to fire. Normally those people don't have their pictures of themselves on there when they're having that type of conversation. But, I don't think he's in serious trouble. I think they're going to give him a couple more years to figure this out personally, especially if Gene Taylor continues to be the athletic director. What I would like to see, though, is some sort of changing in his coaching staff. Maybe not firing or removal, but bringing in somebody that could maybe give a jolt to the offense, because towards the end of the season, especially, and we saw in last night's game as well, the shooting was bad and the shooting continued to be bad. And the offense struggled with just trying to figure out how to get the ball down low or find open shots. And obviously that comes with some talent level as well, but that it seems to be a growing problem that has not only happened this season, but was an issue as well last year as well. So I'd like to see them maybe add an offensive-minded assistant coach to help Jerome Tang and the rest of the Wildcats take that next step forward, because they have the talent. And if they can keep it around, because the transfer portal is coming soon, obviously you want to try and build this team and keep this nucleus. Jerome Tang continues to talk about the Houston model, right? What Houston's done over these past couple seasons, retaining all these players and then just bringing in players to retool and continue to be a top team in the nation. He wants to mimic that. Why wouldn't you? And if they can do that, if they can keep these players around, then I think they have a good chance. But they got to change a couple schemes as well.
If anybody is a fan of Jerome Tang, I want to raise my hand and say that I'm in that camp. He was, when we were in Waco together, one of the nicest assistant coaches to me. When Baylor won the Big 12 championship for the first time, I guess for the second time, when they went back to back, the first hug that I got was from Jerome Tang on the court. And I'll never forget that moment. Somebody who would go out of his way to make sure that many of us felt seen and to open conversations and to become an arm of the program that was open to fans, to media, to those of us who wanted to give Baylor its flowers. I want to give Tang that credit. It has not gone the last 2 years the way that it was expected to go based on an Elite Eight run in year number 1. And now he's facing heat that I would agree with you is altogether unwarranted. And there were conversations last year of the president of the university or the athletic director of that department not having full support of him and his decisions, and just friction points that have made things tough for Tang. Yet he has withstood a lot, including, I want to bring up Coleman Hawkins here, who made $2 million in NIL this year. And yeah, he was emotional after the game, talking to reporters, was upset. And what I go to is, man, 23 years old, right? We're in the workforce now, making $2 million for your university. It's twofold. On one hand, ma'am, you can't talk about like of course there's pressure. Of course, the media and the fans got to you, that noise got to you, but also you're a $2 million man. I would take $2 million for a year of pressure at Kansas State. Then on the other hand, I think NIL has really fostered this, put unnecessary and new pressure on players that causes this pressure cooker that puts Coleman Hawkins in the position he was in this year. If you're Tang, you've got to manage that. And from my perspective, the host of Locked On Big 12, Christian, it seems like the Hawkins situation is a microcosm of just a whole lot of problems with NIL in Kansas State because of the sheer amount of money the Wildcats doled out this year.
I don't disagree with that whatsoever, but I will say that it has seemingly shown to drastically improve over the last couple weeks. I think if you would have asked me this same question a month and a half ago, I would have been completely on board with you saying something has to change. I'd be on fire. I'd be streaming at the top of the rooftops, Drake, saying the exact same thing. But what I saw, just for example, after the Arizona State win in the first round, Doug McDaniel and Coleman Hawkins sitting at the press conference table talking about the game with Coach Tang, you could just tell that the vibes were different. The feeling with this team, the buy-in, the buzzword that Jerome Tang continued to use this season when he was trying to get this team all on one page after that crappy non-conference, after bringing in a bunch of different players from different spots, bringing them in, trying to work as a cohesive unit. I think that it finally started to click. Unfortunately, that was March. That was the biggest problem. And I think that is the biggest lesson that Jerome Tang and the rest of the coaching staff have to take from this. This is the first year they really dove in deep, spent money on NIL. It took them a long time to get together and figure this out. If they can, again, going back to that whole spot, if they can have that nucleus and build a huge core, because they just let everybody walk last year.
Yeah.
If they can build that core and find a way to continue that culture moving into next year, I'm not so concerned because I think Jerome Tang is a great coach. I'm right there with you. And I think he can lead this team back to the NCAA tournament, back to wherever the case needs be. And I really do. But it all starts there. With the Coleman Hawkins situation, though, that obviously is what led to all of it. And yeah, you talk about how much money he made. Obviously, that was a huge concern. But there were multiple people on social media that was attacking him for his performance. And we've all seen this. And this is not just pushed towards college basketball or college athletics as well. It did come down. There was some investigations, investigative journalism, if you will, on our good old Twitter feeds. And it came down to a gambling account. People were mad that they were not getting their bets. It wasn't even Kansas State fans so that were upset about that. I think that was what makes it even worse. If you didn't know, he didn't perform well last night, but he has a fractured tibia. He's playing on a fractured tibia. It's absolutely insane.
The fall apart, and fall apart is to me the right word, of Kansas State at times this season leads to a year without a postseason bid for Jerome Tang. I do expect him to be back next year.
This message is from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Texas was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were ever going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can get your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention, and they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Disclaimer, only available with TurboTax Live service. Real-time updates only available in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. And thanks and welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Do me a favor and click that subscribe button now. We will be getting a lot more football content now as we dig in. We still have Selection Sunday coming up for the women's. We're obviously going to talk about that. But I think we are all done when it comes to the men's side. We will have, obviously, recruitment coming up. The transfer portal is here very soon. So we will still have basketball content. But we're about to get real heavy in football, and that's where we are about to get really excited, folks, because the momentum on that football team is here. Why I think the season is over, why I think there's no postseason, well, obviously we know the NCAA tournament is out of the question for Kansas State, but the NIT, the Crown tournament, doesn't sound like that's going to happen either. Jerome Tang was seen that he is saying that he's going to be unlikely to continue the season in any type of postseason tournament. He thinks that the crown in Las Vegas comes at a very bad time. This doesn't start till around the Final Four time at the end of March. This is past the transfer window as well. And he thinks that seniors like Coleman Hawkins and David Gasson, the only two who are not eligible to return for Kansas State next season, won't want to play in it. So he said, quote, "I don't see that happening." So as of right now, nothing is confirmed, but it sounds like Kansas State's season is officially over. Is that a good thing? Well, after these peaks and valleys, it very well might be. The biggest thing moving forward is finding every possible way to keep your core together. If you can keep that core together, and even if it's just a few of them, I mean, I would love 8 players to return from Kansas State and then retool and add a couple in the portal. You already got a couple offers, a couple commitments from some freshmen coming in, which we're going to have a conversation on that to end the week in just on Friday. But I really do think you have to focus on that part of it moving into the offseason. So maybe not having a postseason tournament now that you're not going to be in the big dance. Obviously, you would love to be in the NCAA tournament, but not going to the NIT, not going to the Crown might be in the best favor for this squad. And if you remember the NIT last year, it didn't feel like they wanted to be there. So maybe it's a good thing. The main focus needs to be keeping Doug McDaniel, keeping Brennan Hawson, keeping David Castillo, which there was a presser that came out after the game. Someone asked him if he plans on returning to Kansas State, and he said, quote, "Absolutely. He's ready to roll." He said he's all in. So it looks like David Castillo is coming back. That is huge. That is absolutely huge, having a guy like David Castillo back. We'll see what happens with Max Jones. We'll see what happens with Moby. We'll see what happens with Buddy Rich. We know that's a name out there. We'll see what happens there. I'd love to have him back. We'll see. They've got a lot to go on moving forward. We're about 2 weeks away from the spring or the basketball transfer portal window. So we'll see if anybody decides to leave. Regardless of that, we need to keep all eyes open on other players heading into the portal as well, because Kansas State has to improve somehow. They have to find a way to build up and replace Coleman Hawkins, replace David Gasson. That is not going to be an easy task whatsoever to replace those two players. I mean, we saw what Coleman Hawkins was capable of in that Arizona State game. We have seen what David Gasson has been capable of all season long, especially in this last game against Baylor. Double-double to end his college career at Kansas State. So a lot of things to talk about still when it comes to basketball. Just unfortunately won't be any more post games until next season. But we still got the women's team. They're coming up. Hopefully they can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. Ayoka Lee should be coming back, hopefully ready to roll. And with that being said, maybe still a chance for this season to be the first natty. I mean, I'm hopeful. I got a ticket sitting in my truck from our friends at FanDuel that says I believe in the women's team to win the national championship. I think I have it at plus 960 odds. I bought it I picked it such a long time ago. It's been sitting in the middle console ever since, waiting for our chance to cash it in. All right, folks, we'll be back here with another episode tomorrow. We're going to talk some college football. We're going to talk some basketball recruiting. And then throughout the weekend, we'll have some stuff coming out as well, including Selection Sunday when the women's bracket is revealed. Will Kansas State be a 4 seed? Will they host? Right now, it's leaning towards a 5 seed. It's leaning towards them potentially going down to Ole Miss. That's the latest I saw. Maybe we'll have a game in Manhattan. Doesn't sound likely. Looks like we might have to hit the road, but maybe that's a good thing. We'll talk about that more on the Selection Sunday show, and we'll have so much more for you here every single day at Locked On Kansas State. But until then, please like the video, please subscribe, and this has been Locked On Kansas State.